Inside info.
A little bit of a different, a unique set of inside info this time around. In the lead up to Melbourne Cup night, I've been a big fan of something that I don't think too many people use as yet, but the more we can get this out there, the more people I think are going to find this tool really, really handy in finding a winner. I speak of the race data supplied by GRV, and the man behind that data, which I think would surprise a lot of people, is the great Patch Adams, and he joins me on the podcast. Patch, what's going on, brother?
Great to be back on the Green Light On podcast, Jim. And I thought wearing collar on this podcast might be a bit too far, but given the shirt looks a bit like a pajama top, I'll probably neutralise it a little bit, mate. So it's great to be back in business on the pod.
Yeah, I thought you've just grabbed the old tea towel from beside the oven and just chucked that on.
Like that, innit?
I actually put a little shirt on, like a bit cash, but I've gone with a sort of a green look for this podcast. I thought Melbourne Cup. Normally I'm in a singlet, a bintang singlet, but I thought we'd jazz it up this time around, mate. But I wanted to get you on for a couple of reasons, to chat the GRV data and where people can find this data, how they can use it, and, of course, what is Patch Adams like in the two big races coming up this weekend at Sandown Park. So we'll start with the data. Tell me a little bit about GRV Race Data.
Yeah, so for a long period of time, everyone would have seen the positional graphics that overlay races at Sandown, the Meadows, Hillsville, Terrelgan when it was up and running, and it's a lot more behind that. I mean, that's the public-facing thing while the race is on, but there's a lot of data being recorded in the back end, positional, sectionals, all that sort of stuff. So what I've been doing, at least at Sandown in the Meadows, and that's just purely making sure I can do it properly without overdoing it. Of course, Hillsville will come in time. But what it does do is provide you with a different point of view on a race. So we all see the race go by. You see your dogs go to the front, run fast time, dogs come from behind. You can see that happening. There's a lot of obvious things that happens, Jim, and when you look at the data, it justifies that in a lot of ways. But there's a lot of diamonds in the rough as well that you don't necessarily see when you are watching a race, that you go back and think, hey, this greyhound's run second last. It's ran home in the second fastest time of the meeting. There might be something to follow in this. So I know, at least personally, when I go through my form, typically week to week on a Thursday night at Sandown, I just can't do the form anymore without having the data in the other tab, where if you do have greyhounds that have finished back in the field, you can go to the data and really get a better understanding of what that run was really like.
And to break this down even further, mate, as you say, Hillsville, the Meadows and Sandown, they all have the GPS tracking. So as the greyhounds are getting their racing vest on, a little GPS tag goes into the top of their vest, and this data is from that.
Yeah, 100%. So it doesn't always work to plan, given this, I say this technology is in its infancy, at least the way we use it is in its infancy at the moment. So it does rely on a bit of human input. So fortunately, we get most races under our belts, and it's through that Isolink system. And fingers crossed, when Cranbourne opens up, we do have that system there as well. And we are, as a business, in a better place to be able to do this stuff a lot more naturally and autonomously, instead of me bending over backwards with spreadsheets to get these things up.
Yeah, to be honest, mate, I was surprised when I found out the great Patch Adams is the man behind the GRV data. I'm going to put a screenshot up now of Saturday, 22nd of November. It's the first page of a fair few pages of data that you release on the weekly. Best way to find it, I reckon, is just type in GRV Race Data to Google and it will be the first one. As you can see with this first page, you've got on the left-hand side first split, the back split, which is the middle section, the run home time. And this first sort of run of names and numbers gives you the best of the meeting. And if you go, let's say, to the first split, Sharapova Star was the quickest to the first section. Your back split was Intrepidus. Your run home time was Paul Quinby. So as a punter, we might sit there and go, gee, Sharapova Star, you can back her anywhere because she's going to jump quickly. That's what she did the other night. Intrepidus with that lightning mid-race speed, he's going to put himself into a good position whenever he jumps well. And a greyhound like Paul Quinby, Cheeky Chompers, Vista Weird, they're the ones that had the best run homes of the night, Jason. Their dogs I black book and say, well, we'll just wait till they get to 600 metres. You know they're going to run it.
Yeah, particularly Chompers. I mean, he was one that I've seen Dave and Gav nominate him for these better races and think, geez, they must have an opinion of what this boy can do. And then Saturday night, we see what he can do. And, of course, the numbers back it up, despite him running third or fourth. So he can really run. And you're right, it's not only helpful for us and waiting for them to step him up to 600 metres, but it's helpful for them too, to understand where the dog is at instead of watching the replay, seeing him do what he does and make these guesstimations about his performance. And there's actually been an example of that with dogs who aren't of these sort of profiles, Jim. And I don't mean to throw you under the bus with an off-air conversation, but there was a maiden series where, of course, it culminates into a maiden final on Melbourne Cup night that you've identified one that's gone around at big odds and performed well.
Yeah, Dr. Babette was the dog. First start, I think, in a race was last Monday night. We're recording this Monday, Monday 24th of November, so start of the week. It ran second tonight, but on the run from last week, Jace, it had the quickest last 100 metres of the meeting. And I'm a little bit of a punter, so I sat there and I thought, gee, if you're reeling off those type of stats, you only need an ounce of luck in running, and you know you're going to be very, very competitive. Now, I had a little place bet on the dog, Jace, and they were betting a massive price for this to run top two. I'm talking $9, $10. And if it wasn't for the race data, although I called the race and it sort of caught the eye, I think the numbers back it up. And that's where this data, I think, is such a positive tool for punting.
Yeah, it is. I mean, as I said, it does sort of justify a lot of what we already know, and then we get the luxury of being able to compare that against other good dogs. But there are certain situations where we see some pop up that we just don't know about. And when I put it together, I think, geez, is this, and although it's always right, you go back to watch the replay to make sure it's right, and it always is. So as much as I said, a lot of it justifies what we do see. There are diamonds in the rough, as you suggested, and have taken advantage of them that everyone can get involved with.
Talk to me, mate, about the Melbourne Cup heat night, because I think there was a few that would have stood out. You've ran your eyes over the data thus far. What do you reckon were the standout performers?
Well, I think when we go into the field of which it is, it's clearly even with the amount of early speed in the race. So you've got to dig deeper and find something to separate them on. And one greyhound that you've been singing the praises of that I was getting around going into heat night was Intrepidus. And when you look at his acceleration rate, I mean, just even in back-to-back races, him compared to Dacey's Rory, between 20 and 50 metres, Intrepidus puts a length on Dacey's Rory just in that 30-metre gap. So, I mean, he was the one that stood out to me, Intrepidus, that turn of foot. So clearly you got your all-rounders like your accredited dashing sleigh, but it was that turn of foot of Intrepidus that will put you in a commanding position in the Melbourne Cup.
I'm just having a look at the cumulative metres, time to each listed distance, top 10 for the night. Sharapova Star was the 20, the 50, the 100, and Intrepidus the 200, the 300 and the 400. Now, you could probably argue, Jace, that a Melbourne Cup will be won through the first 400 metres, and based on the data from last week, it's Intrepidus. Now, you have to obviously then put that data into your own form and say, well, he's drawn box number 7. Is that going to be a disadvantage and maybe bring him back to the pack? I think it will.
Yeah, well, that's the other point of view to look at as well. Who's drawn box 8? Jim, so Graham with not much speed. Dacey's Rory. So he's not going to begin that well. So therefore, for Intrepidus, he's got that little bit of insurance on his immediate outside. Then you've got Paul Zuri in 7. Now, another thing you could look at in the data is what her average distance to rail was throughout her race. It was under 1 metre, which isn't that common in a lot of races. It's always sort of your 1 metre, 1, 1, 1, 2. So she will want to get to the fence. So that's another thing that you can sort of uncover, where I looked at before and thought Intrepidus probably gets the room. You combine that with that acceleration compared to the rest, he's going to be going forward early. There is absolutely no doubt about that.
All right, so I'm going to break this down, Jace. What's your favourite tool to use on the GRV race data? Is it the first 20? Because I know a lot of punters who try and find winners, and this data doesn't just back it up. It actually tells you who was the quickest to the first 20 metres for a whole meeting. I mean, that's a tool worth having. And to be honest, you can sit there and watch the race. It can be hard to analyse who's actually in front after 20, and it's impossible when watching the vision, watching the tapes, to actually analyse what time they're running at that point.
Yeah, 100%. And it's all situational based as well, because you can see one fly out and it's just flown out amongst a field of slugs, so to speak, in the first 20 metres. Or you can find one that visually hasn't begun that well, but there's 3 or 4 dogs around it who have jumped in the same manner and they've all gone well. So this sort of certainly separates that. My favourite ones to look at are the ones where there's unknown attached to it, whether it's a dog that's 5th or 6th and you want to know what it's done in the second half of the race. And clearly there's some dogs that when they get to that point of the field, they just don't chase. And I think you can sort of get an understanding of each dog's profile. But there's some that Don't throw the towel in, and you get a real indication of where they're at ahead of the next start. So it's normally the run homes of dogs, all of them, but particularly ones that haven't won. And obviously the last 100 metres comes into play too, because our 12-second, 10-second run homes at our city tracks, that's a long period of time. And dog can peak when they get to 400 metres, then fade away, and the run home's still good. But I think that last 100 metres gives us a different perspective of that.
Mate, as we wrap up, I've got one that I reckon if you watch the vision of the race, you probably wouldn't be that taken by the run. But if you go back to the data and check out Miss Envy, she went 5:01 to the first split on the tag, which is red hot. 19:44 down the back, which is really slow. And that's because of the trouble she found at the first corner. Run home was 10:36, was actually 5/100ths quicker than Dashing Sleigh, which is extraordinary. And the last 100 metres was 5:83. Now, what this data tells me, that if the Shinners camp happen to stick around and have a go at the Sir John Dillon, I think it is this week, over the 5:95, she could go a very, very long way to winning that. She's got the pace, 5:01 to lead. She's got the wheelhouse at the end to run home. And 10:36 with a 5:85, 5:83, in fact, in the last 100 metres, mate. That's blowing up the data.
Yeah, it is. And you mentioned a lot of these times where, whether it's a first split, back split, overall, that people might look at and say, hey, I'm looking at this PDF, or I'm seeing these split times on TV when the race is on. They don't match up with what I'm seeing in the form guide or on the semaphore board. And that's okay, because we are talking about two different timing systems. The ones you see on the semaphore board, they're official. That is through finish leaks. It's through the beams of which the greyhounds break to set those numbers. We're talking about a different system here where, as you mentioned earlier, that tracking chip is behind their neck and the top of their rug. So that's why we see slightly different numbers. But all in all, it's still a fantastic indication. And
website, mate, we want to give it in full. How do we jump on GRV Race Data to wrap up?
Yeah, so you can go to the GRV homepage, hover over racing, and then Race Data's underneath that. Or you can make it simple, grv.org.au/race data.
Well, I'm always on there, mate. I want a tip from you. Bold Trees and Melbourne Cup. What have you come up with your brain, with Patch Adams' brain? Because we know we probably could put the data aside and still tip a heap of winners, mate. But you've got the backing of the data. Who do you like in both of the big ones?
Intrepidus, I just think that turn of foot is vital, and it separates him from a bunch of others that have a stack of speed. So gets home in 10:70. That's not great, clearly. But when you're leading, breaking hearts, you want to be doing that in the Melbourne Cup. So he's on top. And then I've gone Without a Trace in the Bold Trees. As much as she had that ripping tussle with Aiden's Warrior, just going with the consistency of which we've had from her over the past couple of months. So the draw's not ideal. She must get ahead of these others. But I think she can do that. So I'm not willing to be against her after I've been on her bandwagon for a number of months now. So Intrepidus and Without a Trace in the big ones.
Good on you, Patch. Enjoy Melbourne Cup night, mate. I'm sure you'll be sitting upstairs after the last, sinking into a drink of choice.
Mate, no good night ends without that. So very much looking forward to it, and fingers crossed everything's going to plan, Jim. Thank you.
What are you really gambling with? For free and confidential support, call 1-800-858-858 or visit gamblinghelponline.org.au.